Hello everyone and welcome to Video Game Jumble. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual because the video you're about to see is actually my first ever live podcast. It was actually streamed live on twitch.tv with my co-host and friend Zeronius. You can follow him on Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter if you'd like. And there was no script, just a general outline of what we wanted to talk about. So this video is definitely something new for me, but I really enjoyed filming it. Now, there are some audio bugs in the video, and I just wanted to say that I'm aware of them, and I'm going to do my best to fix them before the next podcast. But I'm still pretty proud of it, and I think we did a good job for our first podcast ever. So with that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy Video Game Jumble's podcast episode number 1, in which we talk about our video gaming background and some current events in League of Legends, Hearthstone, and World of Warcraft, with a little sneak peek on BlizzCon in there as well. That's coming up next, guys. My background in video games is, well, I'm 24 years old now. I probably started when I was around 10, I want to say. I think the first game I ever played was Age of Empires 2. And I used to play on my old Power Mac G3.
Top of the line, baby.
Yeah. Those were good times. Good times. I'd say that's the first game that I ever truly loved. I played it probably for about a year and a half. I got kind of serious, and then I discovered MMORPGs and started playing RuneScape, and that lasted for a couple of years. I don't know. Did you ever actually hop on the RuneScape hype train back then?
I did, and this is probably one of the lowest moments of my entire video gaming escapade. Was so I'm 2 years younger than yourself. I'm 22 years of age, and when I played RuneScape, I was at the age where it essentially just filled time instead of was me playing a game. And so
so you didn't take it like a serious kind of game that you were
right.
playing. It was like...
So I'm not exaggerating. Okay, I'm being dead serious.
All right.
I did not leave the area with the goblins directly outside of the starting castle area for 3 years. I played that game nonstop for 3 years.
How do you do that, man?
I grind. I don't know, man. And I hate grinding too. Maybe that's the reason I hate grinding now, is because of that. But what ended up happening was I grinded to the point where I could wear dragon armor or
on
something
goblins.
Absurd.
On the goblins.
On the goblins, where I was getting 3 points per. And I remember the first thing I got was the weapon, and then I got the armor. And then I think you have to grind the shield too, right? If you're running a shield.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that, and I grinded, and I grinded. I killed those, and I think maybe at one point I ventured out, maybe to kill the cows in the next area. But besides that, yeah, man, I killed the goblins and the imps. I remember I sold the beads. That's how I made my money. Was I sold
Holy
beads.
moly. I thought I had some janky strategies, man. I remember going into the Varrock sewers, and I would grind on the skeletons that were down there.
Right.
And I had this whole system set up where I would bring a tinderbox and a wood cutting axe with me. And I would kill the rats. I would collect their meat, and there was one dead tree that was down there in the sewers. I would chop down the tree. I would start a fire, and then I would cook the rat meat. And I would use that to sustain me while I fought the skeletons. So I never had to leave the sewers. It was
How long did you stay in the sewers, man?
Months. It must have been months.
Oh my god.
So yeah, RuneScape I'd say is the first MMORPG I ever played. Um, so it definitely has a fond place in my heart. But yeah, after that, let's see so for you, what's the next game that you played after RuneScape? What would you say?
So, ironically, I actually played games before you. My dad's in the video game business, and so it
Uh,
just kind of came with the turf. And I can remember being 4 or 5 years old, and I started playing on the N64 and the Game Boy Color. So on the Game Boy Color, I had played, uh, it would have been Pokemon. I played Blue while my brother had Red. And then also on the N64, I played mostly Mario Kart. Was like my jam. Like I didn't have Diddy Kong 64 or Paper Mario or Super Mario 64. A lot of the popular titles. I played Smash, which was Melee at the time.
right.
Um, and so I played, or was Melee or was that the GameCube?
Melee was for the GameCube, yeah.
Right, so it's just Smash. So I played Smash and I played that, and I played Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Stadium.
Okay.
Because I was really big into Pokemon, I still am.
So
And
for me, the next game I played is also for Game Boy Color. Also a Pokemon game. It would have been Pokemon Gold. And I
right,
probably would have been around, I don't know, like 12 years old by that point, probably.
sounds about right.
'Cause that's how long it took me to finally save up enough money from doing chores and stuff to buy a Game Boy Color and buy
Right.
one game with it, and that was Pokemon Gold. And that game, and for probably like a year, I would just come home from school and just play that game on my Game Boy Color until I went to bed.
Yeah, I remember for the longest time the game that I played forever and still do is when Pokemon Leaf Green came out,
Right.
which is the Gen 1 remake, which is my probably my favorite Pokemon game.
Uh-huh.
And then I also um, I played a lot of WoW. I missed a lot of school just because I was sick a lot, ironically, and I wasn't even ditching school, but I was sick a lot, and so I just played a lot of WoW. And yeah, it was absurd. Like I was the youngest of everyone. That's when I think you and I started hanging out a little bit. Was right around that time.
That would have
Um,
been, I was probably
Middle school.
almost 14 by that
Yeah.
point when I
Yeah.
discovered WoW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Discovered
And
the addiction.
World of Warcraft was my first ever video game addiction. Like Age of Empires and then Pokemon Gold were like the two games that I loved as a kid. But World of Warcraft was probably my first ever video game addiction, where I played that game way too much
Right.
and did not like get the homework done that I should have been getting done. Did not get enough sleep in high school
Yep.
playing that
Yep.
game.
Yeah.
Um, um, so let's see. What else should we talk about?
What's your preferred like type of game? Like I know we differ a lot on that, ironically, even though we're
Right.
very close. So I think that's something to bring up.
Right. So, RTS was the genre that got me into video games. I already talked about that. Age of Empires 2 was the RTS that got me into games. Then it was, I guess, turn-based is what Pokemon is. It's a turn-based strategy game. That was next. And then I discovered MMORPGs, RuneScape, and then later World of Warcraft. And then I discovered MOBAs in League of Legends. And I didn't discover that until, I want to say, the summer just before my first year of college. So,
2010. Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, 2010, probably around 6 years ago. So I've been playing League of Legends for probably about 6 years.
Yeah, because we played in season 1, so that's right.
Yeah, so I would say those are, how many genres was that? 3?
Yeah.
RTS's turn-based strategy, no, 4. MMORPGs and
Right.
MOBAs.
Right.
I would say those are the 4 styles of games that I play the most. The one genre, probably major genre that's in there that I would say that I haven't played is, or not that I haven't played, but that I don't really enjoy as much is first-person shooter games.
Right.
For some reason, something about the genre just never appealed to me. And so I kind of have a deficit in knowledge when it comes to that genre.
Yeah, and as you know, I'm the opposite, where I started playing Call of Duty back when it was Call of Duty 2.
Right.
And I played on the PC, and I must have been 8 years old, 9 years old, maybe. And that was that's the first game that I played against other people. Like, pretty much every other game that I played, except for maybe a little bit of Super Smash Bros.,
Right.
it was predominantly based off of playing by myself, figuring things out by myself. And I remember I played online, multiplayer. I played a lot of Capture the Flag, actually, in Call of Duty 2. And that's what led me to play Call of Duty 3 and Call of Duty 4.
Right.
Now, Call of Duty 4, along with WoW, were fairly similar times, I think, because that would have been about 2004, I think, is when WoW came out, because the 10-year anniversary was just the other year. And that sounds about right. And I played those games an absurd amount. I remember in 8th grade specifically is when I was playing a lot of Call of Duty 4. To the point where I reached 10th Prestige. And anybody that knows Call of Duty understands that means I got to the maximum level and then I reset back to level 1 the maximum amount of times.
Okay.
And so first-person shooters were kind of my jam. And I've played every Call of Duty since. I've played a lot of Modern Warfare 2 as well as Black Ops 1 were probably the other two games that I played the most alongside of Call of Duty 4. And then similar to you, I played turn-based in Pokemon, but I also played turn-based in Civilization. I played a lot of Civ 4 a long time ago. And then again, I played League around the same time you did. I think I started about a month before you, similarly to WoW. And yeah, and so that's kind of my background, is a lot of FPS, turn-based Pokemon and Civ, MOBA, and MMORPG and WoW. And that's kind of where I stand. So we're really similar, except I'd say a lot of my time has been on FPS, where like a lot more of your time has been on, I think, turn-based more than anything compared to me.
Right. So I think we could say that your video game experience kind of started off with first-person shooters, whereas mine started off with the RTS genre.
Right. I'd agree.
And we have a Rochelle-phant in chat.
What's up, girl? How you doing?
And she says, bruh, FPS is the best. Get wrecked.
I mean, she's not wrong, dude. Like, I don't know if you have any. That's another topic I think that's good to transition to right now. Is what are your greatest achievements in gaming? What are the things that you look back on and you're still impressed with yourself today about the things that happened? For me personally, it's incredibly simple. One is reaching 10th Prestige in 3 different Call of Duty games when I was hardcore playing the game. That would be Modern Warfare 1, Modern Warfare 2, and Black Ops. I reached 10th Prestige in all 3 games. And then alongside that is in Modern Warfare 2, after only maybe starting to go after it about halfway through playing in my 5th Prestige, I achieved 82 nukes. And so the way you get a nuke in Modern Warfare 2 is you had to get a 25 kill streak without dying, and then you would get a tactical nuke that you could call in and you automatically win the game, and it like kills everybody in the server and you win the game. And I got 82 of those. And it was no easy feat to get one. or a couple, but I got 82. Um, and yeah, that's the achievement that like sticks out to me because I've not heard of any person. To be fair, a lot of our friends don't play a lot of FPSs, but
Right.
a lot of our friends don't have a similar um, achievement when it comes to FPSs that kind of matches up. So that's what always stands out to me.
Okay. Well, oh, we have Aces 23 in chat as well. Hey, man, how's it going? I just want to quickly address, Rochelle that actually asked, what are we talking about right now? So this is something that I think I would really like to add to the Overly Ever podcast. This is our first ever podcast. But I should probably have like a small line that says what our current topic is. I think that'd be pretty cool. But right now we're basically just talking about the background of our video game experiences. And then we're going to move into some like current events that are happening in video games.
Yep.
So back to your question, you said, what was the biggest achievements that I've ever had in gaming? And I think I probably am going to go way back to when I was playing Age of Empires and say that my biggest achievement back then is when I finally got to play with, you know, the big boys,
Right.
the guys who were making the Age of Empires lobbies that were for experts only. I'd say once I became good enough to join those.
Right. Right.
And then after that was Pokemon Gold. So I would say that in Pokemon Gold, my biggest achievement was finally beating the Ice Cave.
I hate that place, man. You're so underleveled going in, dude. It's absurd.
Funny story about the Ice Cave puzzle. You know the part of the cave just before you get out where you're like skating
Right.
across the ice?
Yep.
And you have to basically solve this like ice puzzle to get through it. I was stuck on that ice puzzle for days. I kid you not. And I mean days because I would play all day long. For days. I threw myself at this puzzle and I could not figure it out. For the life of me, I couldn't. It got so bad that I went to my mom at the time and I was like, Mom, I need your help. I can't solve this puzzle. I know what she did. She graphed it out. She graphed out the information. She made a sheet that was like a visual representation of what the puzzle was.
Right.
And she sent it out. She emailed it out to all of her friends that she knew that were good at solving puzzles. And at the end of the day, all her friends came back to her and they were like, I don't know how to solve this puzzle.
Oh my god.
That's how ridiculous the ice cave was.
I hate
And
it,
eventually, because I was so stubborn, I just out by accident. And once I figured it out, I was like, oh shit, I think I just accidentally beat this. It was a complete accident. I was walking in random directions at that point. But yeah, that was a pretty big achievement back then. And I think that sense of like, that was the first time I really had that sense of like frustration that just lasted for days and days and days. And finally at the end of it, you get that payoff. You know, you finally beat that thing that you've been working on.
Right. Yeah, another thing that actually pops up for me is I will self-admit I did nothing to earn this achievement at all. It's just one of those memories that kind of sticks out that you and I always joke about is when we both played in vanilla World of Warcraft, which is the original, and I didn't raid at all. I think I might have done a little bit of AQ way back.
I did not raid either.
I did.
I wasn't good at it.
Like, I'm pretty sure I walked into a raid with people and I got slaughtered and I got kicked because I had no idea what I was doing.
Raiding back in vanilla was a lot more of an elitist thing than it is now.
And
nowadays, raiding is a lot more accessible.
Right. And so one of the first raids I ever did was because during Karazhan and during the Burning Crusade, I didn't play as hardcore as I had previously a lot in vanilla, where I was focusing more on Call of Duty around that time. And I ended up raiding in Karazhan for the first time with, I believe, a group of friends that included you. And what ended up happening was I was so low gear. I had the proper gear to get in, but everyone else had been raiding for months. And so they had the proper gear. And so I walked in, and the first boss drops a ring. And the way that the roll and loot system worked in the guild at the time was you could roll once for your main spec and roll an infinite amount of times for an off spec, or if nobody else selects to roll. And so I obviously needed the ring very badly. I needed everything very badly. And so I rolled and I won the ring. I proceed to roll on essentially every piece of loot that drops because I'm a druid, and so I can use an infinite amount of agility here, intellect there, defensive stats here, things like that. And I got
because you have so many potential specs, right?
Right, precisely. And so I got 9 epics. I got 9 drops in a single run of Karazhan, and I did nothing to achieve it. I was probably lower than the tanks on the DPS charts. I did nothing, and I had 9 epics out of it, and it was just always so funny to look back on. Like, I've never gotten more than 3 or 4 pieces of gear now in a single instance or a single raid, and that's with rerolls, which got introduced. So that was always something that, while it's not a technical quote-unquote achievement, it's definitely something that sticks out to me.
Right, that sounds pretty fun. In chat we have Aces saying, same, Pokemon Silver hurt my soul on occasion, but I love it.
Yeah.
Apparently we have some shared experiences in the Pokemon games. And that's really what introduced me to turn-based strategy games is Pokemon Go. And that's kind of translated for me into Hearthstone, which is obviously another turn-based strategy game that we're going to be talking some more about today. So I guess we're pretty much done with this topic. I can think of one more thing, which is what games do you play right now, and how long have you been playing them for?
So I'll start off. I'm playing WoW right now. I'm raiding, as you know. I've been playing WoW since vanilla, so 2004, give or take. So about 12 years, I think. Sounds about right.
Probably like around 11.
Right.
11 years, I'd say.
I have played every single Pokemon game that's been released, and I will be playing Sun and Moon. So I've been playing Pokemon since 1998, 99. I'm playing Hearthstone since the beta. I've played League of Legends since Season 1. I have played Counter-Strike Global Offensive for on and off maybe a year or two now. And I think those are... Oh, I've played Overwatch since the beta. We were both at the BlizzCon where they announced Overwatch, and we played Overwatch.
Right.
So we were some of the first people to ever play Overwatch. Alongside H1Z1, I've been playing as well, and I've played H1Z1 since the first day in the beta as well. So I've played it for a long time.
Okay. Sounds pretty, sounds like we're pretty similar there. World of Warcraft, we both played for around 11 years, it sounds like, since vanilla. Hearthstone since the open beta, I assume. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
League of Legends for about 6 years now, since Season 1, I guess. Am I missing a game?
League, Hearthstone, Pokemon.
Wow. Pokemon. Oh yeah, Pokemon Go I've played since its launch, and obviously I started with Pokemon Gold way back when I was probably around 10 years old, so about 14 years ago.
Right.
Around 2002, I think, is probably around when that game was popular / being released.
Right. I think that's about it.
Rochelle Elephant says, "You suck, LOL, Warlock Master Race."
Wow. Right.
And then she says, "Oh my god, that was my coworker, Ryan."
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what they all say. Coworker Ryan.
And Aces says, "Yeah, totally. Pretends to know about WoW."
Yeah, that's the thing.
He doesn't know anything about WoW. He actually
right. We cover a lot of topics, so it's understandable that from time to time you
Okay, well, I think we've got a pretty good background. So let's move into the news section here. We want to talk about some current events, and we're mainly going to be talking about League of Legends, and then we're going to move into Hearthstone, and then we're going to talk some about BlizzCon, which is actually coming up very, very soon here, and then just a little bit about WoW and some recent stuff that's happening in that. So let's get into that.
All right, let's kick it off.
So first up is League of Legends, and I think the first thing we want to talk about is the Assassin update that's happening. And do you know exactly when this is coming out?
This should be coming at the end of the season, which is in a few weeks. So you know how most preseasons, after the season is capped off, there's that preseason period before the season actually begins where they test everything.
Right.
This will be the main patch. This is the main thing that they're reworking besides jungle camps. They're reworking pretty much every assassin in the book.
This is a cool little intro video here.
Yeah,
they just
I know,
have
right?
all the assassins killing each other off.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And they actually do have a countdown here. It looks like in the upper right. So it looks like 17 days.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, 17 days, 11 hours, and 30 minutes. It looks like they have a legit countdown until this. That's an update.
Yeah, so that's the season end countdown. Yeah, so it'll be released right after that.
Okay, so I guess we're just gonna go over this a little bit here. So these major changes, it looks like Talon is first up, now with parkour. And you said that's because he can now jump over walls. Is that true?
Right, so I'm unsure if it's his passive or his E, but he has the ability to essentially roll over a wall, or I think climb up it. I think it's usually roll over it. It's incredibly weird. But yeah, so a little bit of more context. We have both reached Diamond in League of Legends. I was even able to achieve Diamond 1 at one point.
I actually did forget to mention that. I suppose that's technically a pretty big video game achievement, is hitting Diamond.
Right, and that's something I should have brought up as well, is reaching Diamond 1 at one point was a really big deal. This was during Season 3 and 4, and my two most played champions were Katarina and Talon.
Oh,
so yeah,
look
right.
at that
so,
E.
Yeah, so Talon's weird. He's super weird. I don't know what the cooldown is on that thing, but it allows him to roam better, allows him to escape easier, because his E was kind of stagnant before, where you had to, the only way you could escape was like ward hop, where you had to ward to a jungle camp, see the camp, and E to it.
Yeah, that is absolutely nuts. He's just hopping those walls like crazy. Does that even have a cooldown?
It's got to have some kind of cooldown.
His Q and W, I just watched the videos for those. They look largely unchanged.
Yeah, his W I think is a little slower. His ulti is essentially the same as well. It's mostly the for some reason, by the way, whenever you exit out of the full screen video, it shows, I think, your desktop. Just by the way, it shows the trash cannot for a split second, just as an aside.
That's strange.
Yeah, the top two champions that I played when I reached Diamond 1 were both Katarina and Talon. And that's because they fit my playstyle. I've always been a very aggressive player in pretty much every game I play. League is no exception. When it comes to League of Legends, I played mostly assassins in the mid lane for a long, long, long time. It was essentially all that I played. So, this assassin update changes a lot with me.
I see what you mean. It does show my desktop background there. Let's see if I can catch up with chat here a little bit. It looks like Aces is just talking about how he's never played WoW.
Yeah.
And Rochelle Finn says, "Do you guys even?"
I mean,
in fact,
do we lane though?
We do. Sometimes we lane together when we do OQ.
That is true.
Right. So it looks like the big change with Talon is that super crazy E.
Yeah, it's so weird, man.
That's
I don't know how I feel about it.
That's gonna be really interesting.
Because think about it, in lane, what's that gonna do for you? Like,
I mean, not much, but in team fights, man, like especially skirmishes, that's gonna be a blast.
right. The thing about Talon before though was his ability to get to the back line or get to the, at least trade evenly with the person once he hit level 6 to 9 to get his rake up in levels.
It's an interesting question because now, before his E was sort of his initiation tool.
Right.
And if there's no wall between you and your target, then what is your initiation tool?
Also curious how it will interact with generated walls. For example, Jarvan the Fourth, can you just tumble out of his ulti? Can you go over Talia wall?
Yeah, that's a good
Anivia
question.
wall? Can it get stopped by Poppy W? Because it's technically a travel, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It seems like probably his playstyle is going to be rewarding trying to sneak around and like get over a wall behind somebody somehow, instead of, you can't really initiate from full vision now if you're like out in the open on Talon now, because you don't really have a tool to do that.
Right. I'm kind of curious if he'll be played in the jungle now, because that would make sense.
Could be.
If he could clear things and tumble over walls, kind of like Lee Sin ward hop. That's how you have to think about it. To me, is he's constantly Lee Sin ward hopping over walls.
It's gonna make him very, very hard to chase down.
Right.
Which is an interesting archetype for an assassin champion to have. That'll be interesting to see how that works out. But let's move on to Rengar here. So what is the most I guess iconic change that they're doing to Rengar?
I didn't look a ton at the Rengar changes. I know they're changing a lot though with Rengar, because Rengar has a very toxic kit where his... That's interesting. What was that?
That's his Q.
Okay.
That's very different.
Right.
I mean, Rengar's Q has been...
so his W is literally the same ability. Okay.
Well, it seems like he gains like a gray shield. Do you see that gray shield?
Not only that, but did you see that? He was able to run through CC without getting CC'd. He was immune to CC. He was immune to Thresh, Flay, and Box Slow. So his W still heals. So I assume it's like an overshield when you're at full HP. That's what it looks like to me.
Right.
Yeah, so he just ran through that.
This video is lagging for me. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, a little bit, but it looks fine.
Okay.
So his E was the big thing they changed, if I remember correctly.
So it's his
or was his E the one thing that stayed the same? Maybe it's that. I guess his E was the one thing that stayed the same.
Yeah, it looks pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, it's just, okay. Yeah, because the problem with Rengar, right, is he's either... honestly, he's almost never useless, right? Because he has 2 items and he can one-shot your carry. That looks really fast.
That does look really
looks
fast.
Not good. How long does that last?
A very, very long time, it looks like.
Okay.
Does it just never end until he jumps on somebody? Because it looks like that was not ending.
That's what it looked like to me. I don't know if there's a way you can read up on that, but that looks like something that I do not want to mess with.
So the ability now says Rengar's predatory senses take over, stealthing him for a long period of time.
So it's not
a long period of... Okay, so it isn't infinite. While stealthed, Rengar gains movement speed and can see the nearest enemy champion to him from very far away. Rengar can leap to the revealed champion for a guaranteed critical strike.
Ooh, that's bad. That's not a good idea. That's a bad idea. That's a really bad idea.
These are some really interesting changes. I'm going to read his Q. Slashes enemies in an arc in front of Rengar, followed by a piercing strike, dealing physical damage and generating 1 ferocity. If cast with 4 ferocity, each strike's damage is massively increased.
Interesting. See, my question is this: does his ulti still give him ferocity charges? Because that was the problem, was that he could jump on someone and triple Q them.
Yeah.
And just obliterate them instantly. Now, if he can't do that...
It's unclear if that's the case.
That's a big deal.
I think it is the case that he can no longer do that, because his ultimate, the text didn't say anything about generating ferocity.
Right, and that would make sense as the key to change. So I think that makes some sense. I'm okay with that. I don't know how I feel about the move speed.
That move
Because
speed looks pretty crazy.
the way League of Legends works is there's a soft cap for move speed,
Right.
where once you hit a certain level of speed, even if you get a certain amount more, it will increasingly give you less, if that makes any sense. It will
Right.
decrease in value. So, for example, if Moby Boots still has 100% effectiveness, Rengar's going to be disgusting. Can you imagine him literally taking 2 seconds to get from bot lane to mid lane? Like,
Yeah.
that's
That's
absurd.
that could be really scary. That's true.
Yeah, that might. It'll be interesting to see where he gets played too, right? Because his Q suggests to me that he'll be played in the jungle. Gives him more AoE clear, gives him more safety in the jungle. Um, but if he's played top lane, right? Do you even need
Right.
TP at that point? I mean, no Rengar top that I see anymore because I see it every once in a while. Runs TP, they run Exhaust or Ignite to kind of cheese. But that
Right.
seems viable now, like almost standard, because what's the point in teleporting where you can honestly run to bottom lane by the time he TPs? Like that's absurd.
It's a good point.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what role he gets played in and just how fast that ulti is, because that seems real fast. That seems real fast.
Yeah. But yeah, it does seem really fast. So let me read his W text here. You're right about the crowd control thing. So it says roars generating 1 ferocity, dealing magic damage, and healing Rengar for a portion of the damage he's taken in the last few moments. So that was that gray shield that we saw. It's actually healing him based on how much damage he's recently taken in the last few seconds or something like that.
I'm okay with that.
And it also says, if cast with 4 ferocity, Rengar removes all existing crowd control effects and prevents incoming ones for a short duration.
If he's burning his ferocity for that, I'm cool with that. I think that's a good change. I think it promotes a healthier playstyle where you could even build Rengar kind of tankier now. Like, do you remember tank Rengar when you would just build tank and it was like AP tanky because his
Yeah.
W shield was super good? I'm okay. I prefer that Rengar, like a tanky kind of run at you and CC you with like 5 stacks of ferocity E, compared to like insta triple Q kill you Rengar. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like we have 5, 6, 7, 8 more champions to get through. So let's keep going through these. Let's try to speed it up a little bit.
Okay.
So LeBlanc. Let's see. What are the main changes for LeBlanc?
It probably says on the passives. So yeah, so if it says new, that's probably of benefit for. Oh,
Oh,
I don't know. Okay,
that's
he needs to get
different.
nerfed somewhere else, dude. LeBlanc's still good.
That is very different.
So her distortion looks the same because there's no new on it, right? Oh, that must be a passive because that
Yeah,
happened.
it's applying her passive. So
Okay, so what's
let's read her passive here. So LeBlanc's abilities inflict Sigil of Malice, which can be detonated and consumed by her other abilities after a few seconds to deal bonus damage.
Okay,
So
so
it
she
seems
gets
like
good for combos.
it seems like the effect that was once attached to her Q is now her passive.
I'm okay with that, mostly because I don't know if you remember this, but one of the ways that LeBlanc was really oppressive was you could just W in and Q somebody and W out, and it was still worth it. Like,
Yeah.
the amount of damage you did was absurd.
Looks like there's a little visual timer there on the passive that you apply.
Which
Her
is
E looks pretty much the same. Is her R the same? Mimic?
this is updated.
Blanc becomes invisible for a short duration. Right, because now they've changed her passive.
Right.
So the invisibility is now attached to her ultimate.
Okay.
So LeBlanc becomes invisible for a short duration, creating a mimic to take her place and cast a stronger version of one of her basic abilities. The mimic lasts only for a few moments and expires if it takes damage from champions or turrets. So it looks like now the instant you hit the mimic, you can determine if it's the wrong one because it'll instantly die,
Interesting.
which is an interesting change there. Mimicking LeBlanc's ultimate spawns a mimic at the target location instead. Once formed, the mimic will walk toward the nearest visible enemy champion, casting a non-damaging version of LeBlanc's most recently used ability upon arrival. So it looks like the Mimic can now cast...
So the Mimic can be mimicked.
Right. It can now cast spells. It'll mimic your abilities.
Okay. I mean, I'm pretty okay with these changes, to be honest, because the thing that the biggest thing for me, right,
Although
is... Go.
It does say a non-damaging version of its most recently used ability. So it doesn't actually deal damage. It's just to further confuse your opponent, I guess.
Right. And
so it looks like they're really emphasizing that mimic portion of her kit to make her a very confusing champion to play against, because it makes it less clear whether you're fighting, a clone, basically, or if you're fighting the real LeBlanc.
Right, and I think the biggest thing is early game, LeBlanc was a little too safe, I think, for an assassin. And I think the big change there is that she has the ability to not stealth early game, right? So you combo in, like, let's say, for example, back when Jarvan was meta, you would EQ onto the LeBlanc, you'd pop her passive, she would pop her passive, and you'd lose her for like a second or so.
Yeah.
And she could get away then because her W cooldown would be slower and all these things. So I think it weakens her early game, and I think in general changes her play style at a minimal, and I think I'm okay with those changes too.
Okay. All right, let's look at Katarina now.
Oh,
so that's an interesting info. Let's look at her passive. Whenever an enemy champion dies after being recently damaged by Katarina, her cooldowns are significantly reduced. So, unchanged. It looks like her passive is still the same.
So Q,
Let's
W, and E got changed. So it leaves a dagger.
Huh. And when she walks over it, it deals some AoE, it looks like.
Correct.
Throws a dagger, dealing magic damage to the target and 2 nearby enemies before falling onto the ground. If Katarina picks up the dagger, she flourishes, dealing magic damage in an area around her. Okay, so pretty much exactly what that looked like there. Her W says new.
So her W also leaves a dagger at your location.
And looks like it gives her a move speed buff.
Right.
Tosses a dagger in the air, gaining movement speed for a short duration. After a brief delay, Katarina can pick up the dagger.
Yeah, so the way this works now with Jumble is I've looked a little bit into this because, again, I mained Katarina for the longest time, as you know. So I watched Skara play Katarina at the Riot offices. So the way it works is if you E onto the dagger, you get it so when you pick up a dagger, your E resets its cooldown. So you E to a dagger, and you immediately have your E again. So you can close the distance by E-ing to the dagger, E-ing to the enemy.
Right, so it says instantly blinks to a target enemy, ally, or dagger. On arrival, Katarina deals magic damage to the nearest enemy. If Katarina targets a dagger, Shunpo's cooldown is massively reduced.
It's literally like 1 second, give or take.
Interesting. So if you had enough CDR, would that be instantaneous?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. That's interesting. See if her R is any different.
Doesn't look like it's instantaneous. Yes.
Looks like there's been a bit of a visual up for the most part. It's the same. All enemies struck receive grievous. It's an interesting point there.
So, Skara had the dream play where he was playing against a Victor, and within about a 7-second period, he Shumpoed 4 times at level 7.
That sounds pretty fun. That dagger mechanic is definitely an interesting change there.
The thing to note is that they didn't buff her damage like pretty much at all. Arguably, they nerfed it because I think the damage on the AoE of the Q is significantly weaker than the previous Q proc via W damage.
So
but they increased your mobility.
Okay, so I have a question about are they releasing the detailed information on the assassins like bit by bit? Because it looks like these ones don't have a detailed explanation. They just sort of have a TLDR version of what's being changed.
To my knowledge, what was happening was the 4 previously mentioned champions received significant changes, while the other 6 listed received small changes. I
Okay.
believe is the correct way to go about it.
Okay, well then let's just read these real quick and see what kind of impact we think it'll have on champions. So for Fizz, it says, Fizz's shark gets bigger depending on how far Chum the Waters traveled.
Right. So if you shortchange, so that promotes Fizz to engage with the shark, which leaves him open to missing it. So previously, Fizz's playstyle was you queue onto the enemy, you immediately shark because it's impossible to miss from 2 feet away.
Right.
You then can activate your E to deal damage, you die. This gives a little bit more like room for error, but it also gives him more damage and a higher skill cap, which I think that's fine.
So when the shark gets bigger, it makes it easier to hit, obviously.
Right.
Does it also deal more damage?
I would assume so.
Okay. Interesting. It's an interesting change. So it basically incentivizes him to engage with his shark.
Right, which again,
making it easier to hit long range sharks.
Right.
So let's talk about Zed. Upon killing an enemy champion with Deathmark, Zed permanently gains a portion of their attack damage for himself.
Right. So this promotes you to kill 80 carries. But it also promotes 80 carries to build QSS.
Gotcha.
Basically. So basically what it means is he's a lot weaker against AP champions. Not only because Sonya's Hourglass is still a thing, but you get a portion of their AD, which means he's going to snowball really hard.
That's really interesting. I actually think I am a fan of this change because one thing, this was probably about 4 months ago now, so it may have been altered by this point, I don't know. But one thing that I had a problem with about Zed is that he didn't feel like he struggled enough against AP champions. It felt like he could take a free lane against ranged AP champions, which I felt should be a natural counter to him.
I agree.
And it seems like this change will kind of promote that fact and make him go after 80 carries more.
I think
and it also rewards him by allowing him to snowball.
I think the one thing that we need to note is that makes him infinitely more valuable against bruiser top laners. Okay, because he'll steal their AD, which is still a big deal, deal for snowballing. So, like, let's say, for example, you're playing against a Riven who might not build QSS, right? Or you're against a Talon or something. That increases your value. And I think that's really interesting. I like your point that you brought up about the AP champions. I think you're totally right. I think it was completely ridiculous that he had essentially a free lane against AP champions, and then if your bot lane was ahead, he could just kill your AD.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm cool with these changes.
Just a quick question. Since you did use the wording steal your AD, I just want to clarify. He doesn't actually take AD from the champion that he kills, right?
I haven't looked into it, but I can't imagine that would be the case. That sounds absurd.
That sounds, yeah.
We went from good to broken in one word.
And
so
from the wording on this, it doesn't sound like it. Just says he permanently gains a portion of it.
Right. So I assume, and again, I don't assume it'll be a lot, but maybe 5 to 10 AD per Deathmark kill, which again isn't very often.
Right. Okay, so let's look at Akali. Akali blinks a short distance, leaving Twilight Shroud at her original location.
Right.
Well,
so
that's kind of vague. Is that her ultimate that they're describing?
I believe so. I believe what it does now is when you click your R, you leave a Twilight Shroud. So it gives you an escape option. So you can engage on someone without going 100% all in, which was Akali's only playstyle previously, which made her very weak. And that makes it so, I know they're changing vision, but if they had kept how pink wards functioned, that would also be a significant buff there, because you drop the pink ward on the first shroud, she dashes back to the first shroud, she's not in a pink ward anymore. And she could dash again, and it's another shroud. So, I don't know.
She still can blink 3 times and leave 3 potential shrouds?
That would make sense to me, and honestly, that sounds kind of cool. That doesn't sound broken to me either.
It could be broken if she had enough damage. It could also just be like really crazy to have 3 Twilight Shrouds at the same time.
Right. I think that's something we'll need to see more of, but I think it's an interesting way to approach it, because again, I don't think they needed to buff Akali's damage So I think if you're going to rework something on Akali, I think making it so she has more options with her Shroud is the perfect way to go.
Fair enough, fair enough. So Kha'Zix's evolutions are evolving too. Q, W, and R are getting updates to be more suited for isolated takedowns. So that's also pretty vague. It seems like they're retooling his main abilities to be more suited for when he's like alone in a 1v1.
Right. So Kha'Zix to me has always been the ultimate solo queue hero, where if you play against a coordinated 5 vs 5 and you don't get split up, he's weak. Even if he's ahead, he's weak.
Right.
Even with resets, he's weak. I think this is like trying to put more emphasis on his playstyle, which again I don't think is necessarily a bad thing as a basis. Again, we need to see numbers, we need to see a bit more, but I think as a basis this is okay.
Okay. All right.
Shaco.
So next let's talk about Shaco. Shaco's clone drops 3 Jack in the Boxes and causes enemies to flee when it dies.
So ironically, now that I think about it, I think these patch notes are up because I've seen part of these Shaco changes.
Okay.
One thing he can do is he can place a W and he gets popped out of stealth for a split second, like a second, and then he gets put back in stealth.
Gotcha.
So if you deceive and you place a box, it doesn't immediately pop you out of stealth permanently, which is interesting. So you can queue behind someone, you can place a box, you go back into stealth, and you auto someone, basically. Again, Shaco is an old kit and an old playstyle that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, he needs something, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's not in a good place.
It's interesting that this particular champion who does have such an old is receiving kind of a, I mean, maybe it's not a minor change, but much less involved, much less of a complete retooling than the other 4 champions that we saw of.
Right. I would argue that Shaco needs a bigger complete overhaul than anybody mentioned.
To me, I think this stands out the most as probably not going to be enough.
Right, I would agree.
Okay, so let's talk about Echo. Echo's passive no longer slows, but Chrono Break triggers parallel convergence as Echo travels back through time.
Okay, so
parallel convergence, remind me which ability that is, do you know?
That is his AoE stun.
Okay.
So when you ult back and you're on top of someone, they get stunned, is what that is saying.
See.
Which I think is an okay change. What was the first part of that?
Echo's passive no longer slows. It basically makes it so that he's not as overwhelming when it comes to chasing people down, because he gets that move speed bonus and he's slowing people. He just gets to run in circles around people, basically.
So Echo Top was really broken for a long time. I remember you were still playing during that, but it got nerfed. This past month or two, it saw a resurgence. And so the problem with Echo Top right now is, while there's a myriad of things that you could point at, the main thing that's the problem with Echo is his ulti cooldown is too short, especially against melee champions. So what he does is he pushes in the wave, he uses all of his mana, he can trade whatever, he bases, he gets half of his HP back, he ultis back, gets the rest of his HP back, and he's back into lane with item advantage, and you're screwed. It's a really oppressive playstyle, and it's really difficult to deal with. I think this is the perfect way to deal with it, because now you're encouraging him to use his ulti more offensively. And I think that on top of the slow nerf, I think these 2 changes are going to be really helpful in nerfing tank Echo and making AP Echo a much more viable and hopefully more used option.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I could see how any top lane champion that can do something like that would be very impressive, because the main thing about it's one of the reasons why top laners take teleport.
Right.
Is because if the enemy has teleport and you don't, well, the enemy can teleport back for a free wave that you can't teleport back for, and they're ahead. And being ahead in top lane like that can be the difference between winning.
Right, and I think they talked about making it so the time in between his passive is also increased, I believe, with the coming patch, which is again another nerf to like just running at them on auto attacking. It makes it so it's more impactful to get that one passive proc than to stick on a target and get multiple, which I think is good.
Right. Okay. So there are some other change. It looks like they're making some itemization changes. They're making changes to stealth mechanics.
Right.
And wards, it looks like as well. Wards affect stealth, but we've been talking about this subject for a long time, so I think we should probably move on.
Yeah.
Let's just stick to only talking about the champion herb at this point. And the next thing that we have to talk about League of Legends is, Worlds is obviously going on right now. So do you have anything you'd like to say about Worlds so far? How have you been feeling about it?
So Worlds is I'd say it's pretty good. I'd say quarterfinals was really underwhelming for pretty much everybody. By all accounts, the quarterfinals was really poor, especially in comparison to the group stage. So I've been writing about this because I've been writing for a company part-time about this. So I'm almost like an expert at it because I've been following the scene for forever and I've been writing about this.
Right.
Essentially, the big deals in the quarterfinals, if we want to very quickly recap, was in Group A, somehow, someway, G2 and CLG both lost to an international wildcard team that made it through, as well as the Rocks Tigers, who didn't look great. In Group B, SK Telecom and C9 made it out. In Group C, EDG, who was one of the tournament favorites along with the Rocks Tigers and SK Telecom, they faltered, only got second seed after losing to an international wildcard team. They lost to a Brazilian team. So the number one seed was H2K from Europe, who won a tiebreaker and went 4-0 in the second week to secure that spot. And in Group D, the group of death, TSM unfortunately did not make it out, who was kind of a favorite to get out. Korea's Samsung Galaxy and China's RNG were able to move on. From there, the quarterfinals were not close. The only two games that were dropped by the winning teams were Rocks Tigers when they trolled in Game 3 and picked Fiora top lane, who's not very good right now. And SKT, who put in Bengi for Game 1, he got shafted. They pulled out Bengi, and they won the next 3 games. So, that's the quick recap.
Out of curiosity, is the sub for Bengi still the same?
Is the what?
Who is the sub for Bengi?
Blank.
Okay.
So Blank is weird. So the thing about SKT is if they had a jungler who was like pretty good at the game, right, they would kill everybody. Their bot lane is nuts. Bang's really good. Faker's still Faker. And Duke, who's been underperforming, it's not enough of a liability to make them lose. But their jungle pressure is zero. Like, their jungler is invisible. They're playing a 4v5 and still winning. It's actually absurd.
Okay. And it looks like most of these quarterfinals were absolute stomps.
It was an absolute stomp. So if you want me to review them really quick, literally SKT versus RNG. So RNG is a team that I don't know if do you know the rosters for most of these teams?
I know whatever their rosters were last year. I'm not super up to date on what they are now or what the major changes have been.
Okay, so SKT, they subbed out Marin. He went to China, and they picked up Najin's top laner, who was the MVP of OGN, Duke, which was seen as a really good move.
Okay.
They stopped using Bengi predominantly, and they started using a guy named Blank, who's really bad, and then they subbed in Bengi, who's really bad, and it doesn't work. Faker's still Faker. Bang is really good, and Wolf is pretty good. And so SKT was one of the favorites entering the tournament. Royal Never Give Up, or RNG, has the most talented roster at all of Worlds, bar none. They have Looper in the top lane, former Samsung White top laner. They have MLXG, who's an absurdly good jungler in China, the best in China outside of Clear Love. They have Xiaohu, who's not a very good main laner, but he's good enough. Like, I'd say he's like on par with Kuro, who's always been seen as like he's good enough to be on a good team. Their AD carry is Uzi. It's Uzi. And their support is Mata. Like, their team is nuts. Like, their team is absurd. The problem is they half speak in Chinese, they half speak in Korean, and they literally get to the point.
Issues.
Right. So the communication is really bad, and on top of that, I'm not joking. They get so tilted sometimes that Mata was in a like a best of series in some tournament, and he picked Jace support and refused to play anything else because he was pissed off. I'm not even
Wow.
kidding. Like that, they have no, they don't have enough structure. But the thing is
That doesn't seem like a very healthy environment there.
right. The thing is they played against TSM in the groups, and Mata played Alistar, and everybody clicked, and they looked like the best team you've seen in a long time. When all 5 players play their A game, they are the best team in the world, and I will say that with confidence. Like they have the best talent on paper in the world.
Right.
The problem is they played game 1, they gave it everything they had. They were playing against Benki, who's on Lee Sin, because the way the jungle metas worked is there's 3 bans constantly in the jungle. You ban like Olaf a pretty decent amount of times. Nidalee is 100% pick ban, and Rek'Sai is really close to pick ban, and even Elise is up there. So what happened with SKT was they first picked a really strong champion, then RNG picked away a jungler, and the next jungler that everybody's been playing is Lee Sin. Bengi played Lee Sin, and he was awful. And so RNG gave it everything they got. Everything worked. Their communication was great. They had great engages. Everything was cool. And then they subbed in blank for Bengi, and RNG just ran out of gas. Like, I don't know what happened, but they were atrocious the next 3 games. They got stomped. Like,
so would you say that the main change there was the jungle sub, or would you say that SKT switched up their major strategy in some other way?
I think SKT has a history, and this has been documented by Monte Cristo, among others, that SKT has a history of not sweeping best of series. A lot of the times, they'll come at you with a soft hook. It's like a boxing term, where they won't try and knock you out. They'll try and feel you out. They'll see what your strategy is. So RNG played the best champions. They played everything they got. They showed them like an Aurelion Soul pick, I think, in game 1. They showed them like every pick they had and every strength they had. And SKT was like, okay, we banned 2 of your champions, we pick away one of your champions, and we put in Blank, who's better than Bengi at reading your jungler, and they just completely stomped. And SKT has been known to lose not only like the first game of a series, but sometimes multiple games just because they're trying to figure you out more than win the game, because then they can win multiple games after that.
They're playing an information game.
Right.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, so that seems like it's a pretty good recap of what's happened so far. So are these updated? It looks like October 21st and October 22nd, these matches are going to happen.
Right, so Rox plays SKT in 54 minutes.
Gotcha, okay. So since that is what's coming up next, how are you feeling about that? Which one of these do you think has the edge here?
God, this is so tough. Okay, so...
It is tough.
So I watched Summoning Insight the other day with Thorin, special guest Froggen, and Monte Cristo. By all accounts, I think it's every analyst, actually, has taken SK Telecom to beat the Rox Tigers.
It's hard not to. They have won so many times in the
They've
past.
won so many times. They have Faker, like, even though, by all accounts, by the way, Faker isn't the best player in the world anymore. That's Smeb, top laner for Rox. Faker is second, and it's as close can be. And so, it's so hard. And the reason it's hard is because SK Telecom have never lost a best of 5 series to the Rox Tigers.
Right.
Let me say that again. They have never lost a best of 5, and that's when they were the GE Tigers.
They have gone 3-2 before, though.
They have gone 3-2, but the thing is there's a big difference between taking games off of someone and finally beating them. That's the thing about the Rox Tigers. Now, think about this. This is what everybody's missing so far, I think, is everyone was like, this is the year because the Rox Tigers finally got the #1 seed from Korea. They finally got out as the #1 seed. Everyone is overlooking the fact that Rox didn't beat SKT. They dodged SKT because SKT lost in 5 games to KT Rolster. That's the only reason Rox won the finals. They won 3-2 over KT, who arguably also won in a reverse sweep over SKT. Right. Now, do you blame Rox for beating who's in front of them? Of course not. But they still haven't beat SKT in a best of 5.
Yeah,
and until that happens, I can't take them.
And it's tough to make the argument that because Rocks beat X and X beat Y.
That they're
obviously.
better than Y. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so many more considerations that go into team matchups than it's like, do their play styles, their specific team play styles counter a specific team play style.
Right.
And I think Rocks Tigers kind of has that chaotic element to them that might be, the one thing that has a chance at SK Telecom, because if SK Telecom is trying to figure them out and Rocks Tigers says there's nothing to figure out, it's just all pure chaos, that might throw a wrench in their plans.
Right. The thing that gives me cause to pause more than anything else in this entire best of 5 series, because I think it will go best of 5, and I think everybody has predicted that it will go best of 5, because again, SKT has been known to lose games, and even if you predict SKT to win, 3-2 is pretty realistic. Yeah. The thing that gives me cause to pause is if you go lane by lane, okay? Let's start at the top lane. Smeb is absurdly better than Duke right now. I would say in general, Duke's a pretty good player, but at this tournament, he's looked really lost. He's had really bad coordination issues. His teleports have been really off. And so that gives Rocks an absurd advantage in the top lane.
Right, yeah.
When you go to the jungle, they have Peanut. Peanut has been playing better than any jungler in the entire tournament. He has looked like arguably the best player in Worlds. Like, Peanut has looked absurdly good. And on the other side, you have the revolving door of who knows what's going to show up.
Yeah.
Like, how do you...
So those are two very weak matchups for them, and two very critical roles, jungle and top lane.
Right, and conversely, SKT has... So, the advantage that Rocks gets there is made up by, essentially, Faker. Like, and it's crazy because while Faker is seen as not as good as Smeb right now, if you believe in Faker versus Kuro, it doesn't matter what the lane matchup is. He's going to exert so much pressure, and SKT knows how to play off of his pressure, that you think SKT is going to win. Now, the problem is I'm about to contradict something I said like 20 seconds ago, where I was like, how can you pick against SKT when they haven't played against Rocks? Faker honestly hasn't looked great this tournament. Like, he's still Faker, but like, he's not looked great. He's not adapting.
He's been playing for a long time.
Dude's been playing for a long time. I don't blame him, dude, but like, he hasn't showed that he could play Aurelion Sol yet. Aurelion Sol is
that's a pretty key pick, right?
One of the most important champions right now, and he hasn't played it. He can play Ryze really well. He can play Syndra really well. He can play Victor really well. He's played a lot of Varus. Like, he's played like 2 or 3 games of Varus for some reason. But he hasn't played Aurelion Sol. And Kuro has shown he can play Aurelion Sol. And the thing about Aurelion Sol that people are talking about is it doesn't matter if you're behind. You just roam. Yeah. You leave the lane. You go help. You 3-man gank Duke. You 5-man gank bottom lane. Like, that's why it's so hard to call this match, is because all of my current form, like, analysis is you pick the Rocks Tigers, okay? They have the jungle matchup. The jungler affects every other lane. They've got the best player in the world in the top lane. They've got the champion pool in the mid lane. Their bottom lane isn't bad. It's Prey and Gorilla. Like, that's not bad. But SKT has never lost a best of 5. Like, that's so tough. That's why I'm really excited for this matchup. I think it's going to be great.
So it seems like skill-wise, one would be tempted to go with Rocks Tigers, right. especially when you consider the matchups that they're going to have. But it's tough to vote against SK Telecom T1 just because of how insane their record is.
It's essentially, do you pick the team that logically should win if you break it down on paper, and even if you look at past results as of a couple months ago, for example, or do you go with the team that doesn't lose in finals, doesn't lose to this team in best of 5 series? Do you take past performances up until 2-3 years ago, or do you take the team that has the best roster on paper left in the tournament that is in good form? I don't know. That's
a tough one.
It's absurdly tough.
I'm excited to see what happens there. My inclination would be to go for Rocks Tigers.
Oh,
but it's definitely tough. I think I would vote for Rocks Tigers to 3-2.
Right. So if we have another moment to go into this real quick, because I don't think we'll talk.
I would not be surprised if it would go either way. really
Right. I think that's the pretty well consensus. And again, if I can just go on this for just a moment, the pick and ban is going to be super weird because when you're playing against Faker, you have to ban Ryze and Syndra if you are on the red side. You have to ban those two champions. Like, he's absurd on those champions. He played Ryze last year when no one thought it was good. Ryze is good now, so he plays it. And it's weird because I think that's a losing strategy. When you ban those champions away from Faker, he's still going to be good on any champion you pick. Conversely, you have to ban out Peanut. Peanut is 25-2 on Elise all time. 25-2 on Elise.
That is a disgusting record.
So the thing about Elise is she's been banned in a lot of games, but there's some games where she gets let through. She's not like 100% priority, but she's a good pick, especially with Syndra. You get like the double stun kind of thing working off. It's a good pick comp. The thing is Nidalee is 100% pick ban. You do not give Peanut Nidalee. No. That's a bad idea. You do not give Nidalee to Peanut. The thing is if you're already banning Nidalee and you're probably banning Elise, the couple picks that are left up is Aurelion Sol. Caitlyn has been top priority this tournament. Zyra support was 100% pick banned in the quarterfinals. She has risen to prominence. So do you give Zyra up? Zyra's probably going to be first picked in this series. Do you leave Jace up? Jace has been really good. Like, there's so many picks up right now. And the problem is if you're going to target Faker with two bans, let's say you're playing on the red side, right? You ban Syndra, Ryze, and Nidalee. Those are your three bans. And SKT knows that. SKT can perfectly plan a pick and ban phase up until the first pick because they know what you're going to do. And it's, unless Faker can play this is what I'll do, okay? If Faker plays Aurelion Sol, SKT will win. If Faker does not play Aurelion Sol, they will lose. That's what I'm going to go with. Because I think the fact that he hasn't played Aurelion Sol is either he's saving it, which would be absurdly cocky because at this point you just free up another ban probably, or you just can't play it. That's a big deal. Like, Sol is a huge pick right now.
So pick ban is a big consideration. SK Telecom definitely has a strong pick ban phase. And that's definitely something to take into. Definitely makes it difficult to take Tigers. And it's gonna be really close. So just to close this out, if you had to make a prediction, you would say SKT would 3-2 rocks Tigers if they pick Aurelion Sol.
Right. If they, I'd almost want to have the caveat of like asterisk, like they play it well. Like, they have to play it at some kind of level where it gets to the point where it's a priority pick so that Rocks will take it early and then they can pick other stuff. I think that's the way that SKT wins this series because, like, logically, it's weird because every expert is picking SKT because, like, you can't pick against SKT. But, like, I think Rocks is, like, Rocks is so good, man. And again, you have to think about it this way. I'll try and wrap this up because I know I've been talking about this for a long time. Is the same thing that happens to Faker, where you can predict what they're going to do, where they have to ban Ryze and Syndra against Faker, and then if you're on the red side, you have to ban Nidalee. It's the same thing with Peanut. You probably he had 3 jungle bans against him in, I think, 3 of the 4 games against EDG. And so you're probably going to have to ban Olaf because he looked really good on Olaf. You're probably going to have to ban Elise because he's 25-2 on Elise. And you're probably going to have to ban Nidalee because he's really good at Nidalee. Like, that makes it just as predictable for the Rocks Tigers in the pick ban as SKT. So the pick ban is going to be really weird because I think both teams know what the other team is going to do. But the only way to switch it up is, do you first pick Zyra? Do you first pick Lee Sin? Do you first pick a Caitlyn? Like, where are the priorities lying? And that's what we'll find out in like 40 minutes.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and wrap that up because I think we've spent a lot of time just talking about this one subject. So let's move on here. Let's move on to Hearthstone. And our first topic for Hearthstone is the fact that come BlizzCon, I believe, they are going to be announcing a new expansion. Is that what they're announcing?
Yeah.
And when they do that, their standard mode will be losing the League of Explorers cards. All of those cards will be exiting the standard rotation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so let's just go over some of the biggest impact cards that would be leaving standard, and let's do that, and we can talk about just the neutral cards first, and then we can move on to talking about the different classes and how we think that will impact the game. So just looking at these, I see Huge Toad. Is Huge Toad still running Hunter? It's not really running Secret Hunter, is it? And nope. Secret Hunter is what's really popular right now.
It got replaced by Kindly Grandmother when that came out.
Okay. So it looks like, wow, look at all these legendaries. Sir Finley is exiting. Bran Bronzebeard is exiting. Elise Starseeker is exiting. And Reno Jackson is exiting. I feel like these are, the rest of these cards are kind of, whatever. Like, these aren't really used in.
So I think the best way,
right now.
I think the best way to sum up the neutral cards is the 4 legendaries and Jeweled Scarab. Those are the 5 cards you see fairly often.
What does Jeweled Scarab run in? That's my question.
A lot of Reno decks run it. Okay. It's a nice one-of card to give you. I run it in my Reno Rogue deck. People will run it in Warlock.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like Bran, Elise, and Reno are all going to significantly impact control styles.
Yep.
That's going to be a big change. So we're going to have to see what they're going to do. Specifically, I'm thinking Warrior for Elise Starseeker. I know Control Warrior runs a lot of Elise Starseeker. It's going to be really interesting how that's going to change the Warrior meta.
Yeah, I think the least impactful of the 4 legendaries to me is Sir Finley. Like, he's a good card, but I don't think he's make or break for a deck. I think he's a nice addition to a lot of decks.
That's true.
Meanwhile, Reno, Elise, and Bran are absurdly important.
Right, absolutely. And Reno Jackson exiting is going to mean that Warlock can't be played, basically, unless you're running some aggro lock deck.
Does Disco Lock run Reno? Doesn't run.
Disco Lock absolutely does not run. It's far too aggressive to run.
Yeah, so that, I assume, is the only thing that would still be around.
Yeah, I mean, not that, some variant of Control Warlock is particularly strong right now, but it's basically the only thing that's keeping them afloat and keeping them somewhat viable is Reno Jackson.
Right.
So that's going to be interesting if they're going to do anything for more control-style Warlocks. And it's going to be interesting to see if they do anything for Control Warrior to compensate for at least Starseeker being taken out of rotation. Right. And while you said that Sir Finley isn't going to be, super impactful that it's leaving the rotation, I kind of like that. I kind of just like the card. It's kind of cool that you discover a new basic hero.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think it's a great character. I think it's a great card design. Rather, I think it's a really nice card to have in the game. And I'm sad to see it go. I just think it's not as impactful as the other cards.
Right. So I really hope that they come up with some more cool stuff like that, because Sir Finley was really a fun card. I enjoyed that card while it lasted. So let's talk about Druid here. All of these cards look impactful to me. So Raven Idol is just great. It's just a crazy card. It's run in every Druid deck imaginable right now, basically. Yep. Mounted Raptor, the main thing that's going to impact, obviously, is Beast Druid. Yep. Beast Druid has definitely seen a decrease in popularity since mid-range Shaman has become the reigning king, and Beast Druid really can't compete with that. It's mid-range Shaman. Right. If you want to compete with that, you really need to be running Mali Druid, which is where Jungle Moonkin comes in, because a lot of Druids have been teching that card in to help them deal with mid-range Shaman, right?
Right.
So the fact that that is exiting the rotation is going to be pretty impactful as well. So that's interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong. Mali Druid will still be good. it'll just struggle more against mid-range shaman,
Yeah,
which is interesting because we'll have to see if shaman is changed to compensate for that.
Yeah.
These hunter cards look like not too much is changing.
Right. So I have Golden Hunter. Hunter's the class I've played for the longest time. I obviously dabble in pretty much everything, but Hunter's been kind of the class I associate with. The only one of note is Desert Camel. Desert Camel is getting run by one person going to BlizzCon. It's really cheesy. It's really troll. Like Explorer's Hat is a gimmick deck. I'm sad to see it go because I think it's kind of a fun card, and I'm always sad to see fun cards go because I don't think it really hurts the competitive game balance. I think it just removes a fun aspect. And Dart Trap is not even running Secret Hunter. So
the only card is Desert Camel that's run.
Yep.
So Camel Hunter is sadly going to die. This card. And that's about it. That's about all it's going to affect.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to Mage. Mage, it looks like they're losing Forgotten Torch, Ethereal Conjurer, and Animated Armor.
So Torch stands out to me.
Torch is absolutely the strongest of these cards, and it's going to be pretty impactful for Mage because that's 3 mana for a total of 9 damage, which is pretty significant.
Well, kind of. That's kind of misleading because you have to cast the torch again.
Right. Okay. So 6 mana for a total of 9 damage.
Yeah, it's still good. Don't get me wrong. But...
And it gives you the extra card. So.
Right, which can also affect Yogg Saron. Because it's an extra spell, etc.
And Ethereal Conjurer. I don't think that's really run in anything except for Arena.
Yeah, I see that all the time in Arena. I think it's a fringe card, which again I think is interesting because I think that just makes existing cards that were already put in or about to be put in obviously come to the front. I think it's another place that if they introduce a card that does similar things or is better, that's the select that gets replaced. So I don't think that's a big deal. Forgotten Torch, however, I agree is a really big deal.
And Animated Armor isn't run
Animated Armor
in anything, so that's not going to affect too much. So let's move on to Paladin. So far we have Sacred Trial, Keeper of Uldaman, and Anything Can Happen is being removed from Paladin.
Right. So this all but kills Murloc Paladin, obviously.
So it looks like, Murloc Paladin, which is essentially the only Paladin archetype right now that is considered remotely competitive, will die with this because Anything Can Happen is the card in that deck, right? Yeah. Without this card, it's Murloc Paladin is entirely useless.
To put that in perspective, there's only one single person bringing a Paladin deck to BlizzCon, and it's one Anything Can Happen deck.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Murloc Paladin is not seen as very good, but if you are going to bring Paladin, it absolutely has to be Murloc Paladin. It's the only thing that has a chance. And Keeper of Uldaman also hurts. It's not as bad as losing Anything for the archetype, but it's a very solid card, and the fact that that's going away definitely reduces their ability to sort of control the board state.
Yeah, I think Keeper of Uldaman's kind of an interesting case because it's a double include and control Paladin deck. Not that those are a thing anymore, but when they were, double Keeper of Uldaman was definitely a thing. But I think it's interesting because I think Paladin is arguably the class that's going to need the most help in the next expansion. And I think the Keeper of Uldaman slot is something that's okay getting replaced. I think if you replace that with like a slightly better card, maybe a better control card, maybe a better aggro card, a freaking 2-drop, please, because that's what they need. I think while most people might see this as a really big hit to Paladin that's already at the bottom, I think if you put it in the context of what's going to end up replacing it more than likely, I think it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Keeper of Uldaman is a lot easier to replace than something like Anything Can Happen, which literally that one card defines
it's a whole archetype.
The entire archetype of the deck. Yeah. Right. Okay, so let's move on to Priest.
Oof, God, I don't want to talk about it.
So
I don't want to talk about it.
Priest is losing Museum Curator, Entomb, and Excavated Evil.
That's so absurd. That's so absurd.
This absolutely just dismantles what Priest is all about right now. Excavated Evil and Entomb are such key cards. I mean, Entomb not only allows you to just completely remove, enormous threats on the board, but it also shuffles it into your own deck.
It's nuts. It's an absurd card. This might be the strongest class card getting removed. Like,
Yeah.
Entomb is so good. And that's not to say that Excavated Evil and Museum Curator aren't good. All three of those see play consistently. Like, oof.
Yeah. And, I mean, I'd argue probably so far the only other card that even remotely compares to it is Anyfin, just because this card defines an archetype. But in terms of just one-to-one power, Entomb is very powerful.
Like, Priest has to get something absurd, because Priest, in my opinion, is the second worst class right now besides Paladin. I think it also has the second lowest amount of decks being run at BlizzCon. And Entomb and Excavated Evil are arguably two of the top 5 cards in the entire class. So those getting removed, don't get me wrong, I hate Entomb. I don't play Priest, and Entomb is absurd. I play Savannah High Main, I play Sylvanas. I already know it's getting Entombed. I think it's interesting because that changes a lot of how Priest works. I think a mid-range Priest is doable if they add the right cards now, because it will be the best deck available. I'm interested to see what happens, but that's a big change. It's a big change.
It's gonna be definitely really interesting to see what they do to Priest to compensate for that.
Right.
Okay, so let's move to Rogue. It looks like Rogue is losing Pit Snake, Tomb Pillager, and Unearthed Raptor. So this is going to completely say goodbye to Death Rattle Rogue.
Which is sad, because that's what I run. It's the Rogue deck I run.
Death Rattle Rogue is bye-bye. Tomb Pillager and Unearthed Raptor are absolutely must-runs in that deck. And without those two cards, it makes it considerably less viable.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what happens with kind of like almost most Rogue decks nowadays run the Tomb Pillager. Even in incredibly aggro decks, it's like the one 4-drop they run, and then they run like a Leroy.
Right.
And
the fact that it gives you that coin just makes it so good for basically any Rogue archetype. That coin is very, very powerful.
Right, it's running Miracle for that reason. Like, it's a really good card. And ironically, if you had asked me like 6 months ago, if I had looked at the League of Explorers list, I would have been like, oh man, Rogue is screwed because Unearthed Raptor's gone. No, dude, Rogues looks bad now because Tomb Pillager is gone, because that's the way the meta shifted. And I think it's really interesting because both cards hurt, because, again, Unearthed Raptor is another... It's not as important as anything can happen, but it's essentially another key component in a complete archetype.
Right.
So
and the fact that they're losing both absolutely drives nail. I mean, Unearthed Raptor isn't the absolute defining factor of the archetype like anything can happen is, but these two in combination absolutely kills the archetype.
Let me ask you this.
Tomb Pillager is also, influential for other decks as well.
Let me ask you this: what you're a Rogue player because you played in WoW as well.
Right.
What's the direction you want to see Rogue take? What are some of the cards you want to see replace these? What does Rogue need to replace this archetype?
I'm a big fan of Tempo Rift.
Right.
I've always loved. And the fact that Rogue has kind of become this thing where they're playing like Zoth with Death Rattle Rogue. It's not really tempo, it's just this huge board swing that you're sort of working towards at the end of the game. And if the opponent has something like all, something like that can essentially just wins, then it's kind of like you're all inning on that. I don't really like the all style of Death Rattle Rogue.
Right. What level drop do you think they're going to put in to replace it? So for Paladin, for example, everyone for like 2 years now has said the problem with Paladin was they removed shielded midi bot, and now they have no 2-drop.
Right.
Do you think there's a mana crystal level that needs to be specifically assisted next expansion? Do you think like it's the 4-drop?
Specifically for Rogue.
Right.
Well, with the removal of Tomb Pillager, I think they will definitely struggle to have a 4-drop that will be effective. I mean, the thing about Rogue that just makes them so challenging is the fact that if they do not draw the cards that they need in the early game, then they're gonna lose. They are the class that is, I would say, the most affected by chip damage to their face, which is why you see sometimes like the only class that still runs the 3/3 that heals your face for 3.
Farseer.
Farseer, the only class that would run Farseer, and you wouldn't be like, what the heck is going on? It's because of that fact.
Yeah, they have no come from behind mechanics. Like Priest has Excavated Evil and Entomb, or Warrior has stuff like Brawl. Rogue doesn't have that. They used to have like Blade Flurry, kind of, but that got nerfed to the ground. And we actually have a pretty decent question from Rochelle if you want to read that off.
Okay, let's read that. So Rochelle asks, if essential cards like these are getting removed, what do they plan to replace them with? Like if Murloc Paladin is the only competitive deck for that class right now, then what will they turn it into to keep it a competitive class? I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully you get my meaning.
It does, and for me, for Paladin specifically, I think we've been pretty okay on touching on what we would change, but for Paladin, it's a 2-drop, dude. They need 2-drops so bad. When you're playing a Paladin, you don't have a 2-drop, man. Like you play. I'm trying to actually think off of the top of my head. I remember they used to run Knife Juggler, but that got nerfed, so I don't think they play that. They probably run like Flame Juggler because they just need a 2-drop. It's bad.
It's basically their 2-drop and their archetype right now is Doomsayer.
Yeah, no, you're right.
That's their 2-drop, and they play that because they don't have a 2-drop. So for their 2-drop, they need to play the Doomsayer to stop their opponent from developing anything on turn 3. Right. Because if their opponent develops anything on turn 3, well, just a crazy tempo advantage because they have no good 2-drop.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would the archetype that I think is going to come out of Paladin. So there's 2 archetypes that get thrown around is close to good enough, but not quite. Is always Control Paladin because you've got a lot of healing. You've got Lay on Hands for card draw and healing. You've got Tyrion Fordring, arguably the best legendary in the entire game. You've got all these things, and by the way, that gets buffed because Entomb is gone. So you're looking at that. The other thing you need to look at is an insanely aggressive. So for the complete opposite spectrum, I remember Reynad ran at one point, and I believe a Taiwanese tournament, he ran like Murloc, Tiny Fin, Hobgoblin, Murloc. Now,
Reynad likes trying to make those aggressive deck archetypes. I've seen him make the face rogues and stuff like that before.
I think it was called Pants Paladin, and I think Hobgoblin got removed, I'm pretty sure, the previous expansion, but you get the idea. So if they add enough, ironically...
It did get removed.
Right, so ironically, Paladin's in this very tentative place where if you give them too many early game drops, they might be better than mid-range Shaman. They have a lot of answers in the mid-game with True Silver Champion, Consecration... Aldor Peacekeeper, they've got a lot of answers. So I think that's the reason Paladin is bad right now, is because if they buff it too much, it's going to be absurd.
Yeah. Paladin does have a very strong turn 4. For example, Paladin's one of the few classes that playing Monkey on turn 3 doesn't feel very good because it's like, well, that just gets True Silvered, and then what do I do?
Oh, God.
So their turn 4 is quite powerful, so it really is the 2-drop that they need. They need a good 2-drop. I agree with that.
I think if you give them 2 playable 2-drops, I think they ascend to at least a tier 2 class, and that's without giving them any other cards. Just 2 2-drops that are quality.
Right. And just to go back to Rogue, just briefly before we move on, I would also say for Rogue, it's got to be a 3-drop, especially with the removal of Unearthed Raptor. They have SI7 Agent and Farseer, which I mentioned, but the reason that Farseer is run is a combination of the fact that they need healing because their damage to their face is so influential, and they just don't have another option.
Yeah, ironically, they actually run a couple more 3-drops when you look at it than most people would expect, but that's because 2 of the 3-drops are Edwin Van Cleef, that's not really a 3-drop, right, and Brand Bronzebeard, who again is not really a 3-drop. And so that I agree with you. I think that Mana Crystal is really weak. I think a 3 and a 4-drop to replace the 3 and the 4-drop that are going out would be good. But even then, Rogue isn't a quality class still. You got to think about that. So they might have to add one more thing to me, I think they need an AoE board clear that's at least 2 damage. I don't care if it's 5 mana. You need something because ever since Blade Flurry, you can't catch up, and if you don't have a catch-up mechanic, you can't play.
Right, and the fact that they don't have that AoE removal spell is one of the reasons why, if they lose the early board, they simply can't come back because they don't have a AoE removal comeback, spell.
Right.
So, okay, so let's move on to Shaman. So Shaman is losing Tunnel Trog, Rumbling Elemental, and Every Fin is awesome. Right. So, Tunnel Trog is the only one of these cards that's actually run. Those other 2 cards are never run in any type of deck.
Right, so deck. You could kind of make a case that, like, maybe Fringe, Every Fin is awesome. What is that card? The legendary that gives you 4 Murlocs. Like, some people thought that was going to be, like, absurd.
Yeah, it could be kind of like a pseudo Bloodlust.
You and me talked about this before. Right, and so you and I talked about this before where Tunnel Trog is a nice removal because screw Tunnel Trog. That thing is really, really, really strong in a really, really strong archetype. That doesn't mean Murloc Shaman is gone, especially because they don't lose a neutral card like a lot of other classes. They don't lose the answers to mid-range Shaman that every other class lost.
Uh-huh. And the fact that Shaman just has so many extremely mana-efficient early game cards, like a 1 mana 1/3 that gets powered up when you play your cards, like a 3 charge weapon that costs 1 mana and gets powered up to a 3 attack weapon.
That
for 3
card
charges.
That card
whenever you roll spell power. Those types of cards is what is making Shaman so oppressive right now. Mid-range Shaman is absolutely the most oppressive deck right now, and even in competitive, I think you said literally every single person is bringing.
All 16 players at BlizzCon are bringing not only Shaman, mid-range Shaman exclusively.
There are no other Shaman archetypes. Everyone in the entire tournament is bringing a mid-range Shaman deck. So that's how oppressive mid-range Shaman is.
Yeah, I think we both agree here. I think that 2 cards are useless here. Tunnel Trog is a nice removal, not nearly enough.
It's not enough. I mean, Tunnel Trog is a piece of the puzzle that makes Shaman so oppressive, but they need to do something, and it's not as simple as Shaman. It's not as simple as cards are gonna add that's gonna change the archetype. They need to do something.
I think a nerf has to come down. I don't think adding cards alone is going to remove mid-range Shaman.
Right.
I think
unless they significantly bring up the level of every single class so that it can compete with mid-range Shaman, I think there need to be some types of nerfs, and I don't think Tunnel Trog is nearly enough.
Yeah, as a quick aside, I think the nerf that I would do is I would make Spirit Claws 2 mana. By the way,
that could be a really good change.
Anyway, let's move on to Warlock.
Okay, let's see. So for Warlock, it looks like they're losing Curse of Rafaam. They're losing Dark Peddler, and they're losing Reliquary Seeker. So I would say Warlock as well isn't really influenced too much. I mean, the Dark Peddler hurts. It's a really good 2-drop. I mean, it's a really nice 2-drop, but Warlock has so many early game cards. The removal of the Dark Peddler really isn't going to, be the nail in the coffin for any type of archetype.
Right. I agree with you, but I think I have a slightly different opinion than you at the same time, where Dark Peddler is good enough to be run as a one-of in Jackson decks.
Right.
It's run in pretty much every Zulok deck. And honestly, the Seeker is also run double copy as well as Peddler in a lot of Zulok decks. And I think Zoo was already hurting because essentially mid-range Shaman is just better. And I think that if you remove 2 cards that are of quality, like Dark Peddler is an auto add in any Zulok deck, any aggressive deck.
Yeah,
and so I think while you are correct, and I agree with you, that it's not archetype changing, I don't think that Zulok is done because these cards are gone. I think Zulok was already kind of done because of mid-range Shaman. And so I think it's going to be interesting what they do for Warlock because I think Warlock lost Mal'Ganis, I think, or they either lost Mal'Ganis or the Void Caller thing or whatever. And so they've been hurting for a little bit, and I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised to see some nice cards for Warlock.
Yeah, that's a good point. And basically the only variant of Warlock right now that is, good enough to be considered in professional play is Disco Lock, which is a very I think of it. I still think of it as a zoo archetype. It's just a very specific niche type.
Agreed.
And in that archetype, you would not run crazy. So, but if you're talking about a vanilla Warlock zoo deck that wasn't specifically a Disco Lock, then yeah, that's a good point about the Reliquary Seeker. And the reason why I didn't even consider it is because you wouldn't run it in Disco Lock.
Yeah, good call.
And Disco Lock is the only thing that's in right now. But that's true. I mean, Disco Lock will still be strong as ever. They're not losing anything. They're going to be just fine. But it's true that just a vanilla zoo Warlock deck isn't really a thing anymore, especially not with the removal of these two cards. It's a good point. Okay, so let's move on to Warrior. So Warrior is losing Fierce Monkey. They are losing Obsidian Destroyer. And they're losing Cursed Blade.
Oh, unlucky. Cursed Blade. Oof.
So I think we can safely say that the removal of Cursed Blade, warriors across the world will be celebrating the removal of this card. Because literally, the only bad thing that can happen when you play Malkarok, or not the only bad thing, but the singular worst thing that can happen to you is that you roll a Cursed Blade.
That's the thing. Cursed Blade stays in that, though, because it's a random card, and that can pull from any expansion.
So if you're playing Standard and it pulls from any expansion, it can still pull that Cursed Blade.
Yep.
All right, well then in that case, Cursed Blade's removal isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
Because this card is not run in any type of warrior deck. And it looks like Malkarok will still pull it, which is unfortunate. And it seems like they just can't escape that fate. That's just something you're going to have to live with.
Yeah, well, I think we're both going to tend to agree on the Fierce Monkey. I kind of want to know your opinion on the Obsidian Destroyer, because for me personally, a couple of months ago, I was running it might have been One Night in Karazhan, I think, was when they released the Checkmate Warrior, which was like the taunt warrior. And Obsidian Destroyer was a key piece in that. Not only was it like a quality piece, but on top of that, it was used pretty often as a one-of in Reno Warrior. And again, with Reno being gone, it changes your perspective on it. But Obsidian Destroyer was not a bad card by any means. Now, conversely, Fierce Monkey gone is a big deal. That's probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite cards in the entire game. It's like a 3 mana, 3/4 taunt. Beast. Yeah, I'm all about that, man. Like, if that was in Hunter, dude, Hunter would be absurd. Like,
absolutely, yeah. That's a real nice card. I mean, it definitely hurts to lose Fierce Monkey like that. Like I was saying earlier, actually, that's the only class that it doesn't feel good to play a 3/4 taunt on turn 3 against is Paladin, because it can True Celebrate. Everything else, you're like, a 3/4 taunt for 3 mana. Okay, let me just slam that out there. I don't even have to think about that play.
Yeah.
And Obsidian Destroyer, yeah, I mean, it's not really. There were a couple of, I think, Bolster Warrior decks that took advantage of the 1/1 taunt buff up with Bolster. Those decks were they're just like for fun decks. So like your fun decks are taking a hit with the Obsidian Destroyer. If you haven't made a Bolster Warrior deck yet, then unfortunately your time is running out. Obsidian Destroyer
It's the same thing as Hat Hunter to me. It's not like it was a great card.
Yeah.
But it was a fun card that didn't like do anything to the meta. So if I could keep it, I would keep it in the meta, because I don't think it hurts at all. Like, there's a lot of like niche cards that you could say like hurt them. Like Keeper of Oldemon was quality enough that I think being it removed is a big deal, and it's fine to remove it. I think Obsidian Destroyer is just a fun card.
Right, I would agree with that. I think as long as they come up with another fun card, it'll be fine.
Right.
It'll be fine. So I think that is basically it for the cards that are going out of rotation.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to get more specific on the legendaries that are being removed, because we did talk about that like a pretty
Right.
decent amount, but it's like that's absurd, man. Like,
We spoke about them pretty good.
yeah, I agree.
I think
Um,
we've covered it pretty well. So
yeah, and I
let's
don't think it's
let's
enough.
move on. The next topic we wanted to talk about with Hearthstone is you know, the championship that's coming up. And it looks like there's 16 players in the championship.
Right.
So if you don't know who is going to be taking place in this championship, these are your finalists. And interestingly enough, I did not know this until I went to this webpage, but you can actually pick which one of your favorites you'd like to win, and they give you a free pack in Hearthstone. So that's pretty cool. So if you visit this site, you can actually get a free pack for picking your favorite. Your favorite to win the whole thing. So that's pretty interesting. And they have a schedule down here as well. And I would like to look at this here because I thought this was a really interesting informational diagram. These are all of the players, all of the 16 players that are going to be at the World's Championship. And this is a graph that shows the decks that are being brought to the championships. Right. And so it's color-coded. So orange is Druid. So you can see that there are 3 players that are bringing Ramp Druid. There are 13 players bringing Malygos Druid. So that's kind of how you read this this graph. And the 13 players bringing Malygos Druid is not very unexpected. It's a very strong deck, and it's one of the few decks that can be teched to kind of counter mid-range Shaman because of that Moonkin card that we were talking about earlier that's actually going out of rotation.
Right.
The Moonkin giving Druids 2 extra spell power actually gives them a pretty powerful way to clear the board against mid-range Shaman, which is pretty valuable because mid-range Shaman thrives by flooding the board. For Hunter, there's actually a couple of different archetypes. There's one player bringing Camel Hunter, which is no longer going to be possible because Camel's being removed. So that's interesting to note. There's 5 bringing aggro Secret Hunter decks, and there's 6 players bringing mid-range Secret Hunter decks. So the Secret deck is really strong right now, and I think a key component to that deck being so strong is Cloaked Huntress.
Right, I agree. When the expansion came out or I guess it wasn't, the adventure came out is the correct way to say that. When that came out for One Night in Karazhan, I saw that card and I said, I don't care about this Menagerie Warden. I know it's going to be good, but man, this Hunter card's going to be nuts, dude. Like, this card is absurd. Like, the problem with Hunter has always been you need to play a proper 2, 3, 4 drop that gives you instant board presence. And if you can do that, you have a shot against any deck in the game. And this card gave you instant board presence with extra to boot. Yep. And on top of that, I think what's really interesting is that the one deck that I've struggled with, I've been playing ladder as of late, as you know, the one deck that I consistently have problems with is mid-range Shaman, obviously, because everything loses to mid-range
Everybody
Shaman.
has trouble with mid-range Shaman.
The thing about Hunter that's going to be really interesting is Hunter more than any deck. Like, you could say this about a lot of decks, but I think it's especially true in Hunter, where if you hit the proper 2, 3, 4 curve, it doesn't even need a 1-drop. Fiery Bat is an extra, like, if you have that turn 1, great. If you play turn 2, either Kindly Grandmother or King's Elec, you play turn 3, Animal Companion Bow, or you play the Cloaked Huntress into a couple secrets. Turn 4, you play either Houndmaster or you play Infected Wolf. You play Barnes. You play double 2-drop.
Oh, Barnes, excuse me, not Morose, yeah.
Yeah, you are going to win a majority of those games. Like, that curve is some of the strongest curve in the entire game. Like, that early game curve is absurd. And you get to turn 5, you go all face, you have a kill commanded to hero power, that's an extra 7 damage. Turn 6, you play high main. You're just so far ahead. That's the thing that I think is going to be interesting about Hunter, is I think everybody that has a Hunter deck is going to ban Shaman. And I think that they're going to feel confident if you're playing a secret deck, you can beat any deck in the game. Anyone, if you get the right draw. Now, conversely, if you don't have a 2-drop, you lose. Like you just lose.
It
But
is draw reliant, but when you do get those draws, it's just I agree with you. You absolutely have a chance to beat anything.
yeah, so I think if there's upsets at BlizzCon, and again, I'm not as up in the Hearthstone competitive scene as some people. If there's like an upset that happens, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Hunter winning 2 or 3 games that it's not supposed to, just because you draw right, and then all of a sudden you're so far ahead you can't lose.
Yeah, and they can really pull out the finisher damage too. Even if they can't quite finish it, they top deck that kill command, and suddenly it's all over.
Right.
So it looks like Mage is seeing a high amount of play too. It looks like we have only 1 player bringing freeze and 10 players bringing tempo. I'm actually a little bit surprised that freeze isn't, a little bit more popular, but I guess most players just see tempo as being the stronger deck because it has stronger tempo.
Yeah, I think the thing about tempo is, I don't know, man. I've always thought freeze was good. Like, I remember when Freeze Mage was played at like Season 1 finals, like because it was so good, and none of those cards are ever coming out of the rotation.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting because I would have predicted a lot more freeze. While I think Tempo would have had more people play it, because I think Tempo, again, is a deck where if you get the proper turn 1 Mana Worm, turn 2 Sork Apprentice, turn 3 Flame Waker into coin, Arcane Missiles, like if you get that draw, you have a really good shot of winning against any deck. And so I think Tempo is going to be interesting because I thought Freeze would be a lot more popular than it is, because I think Freeze Mage on any given day can beat an absurd amount of decks, especially if mid-range is banned. By the way, I'm just going to assume mid-range is banned in every match, by the way. I don't think anybody's going to let mid-range through.
It could be that some people, but it's probably going to be a lot of mid-range banned. Yeah.
Right. And you did have a really good point before we got on about banning Warrior, because there's so many archetypes. As you can see, it's the most archetypes of anything that's being brought.
Yeah.
So when you go into a match against Warrior, you don't know what to mulligan for. You don't know what you're playing against, really. Well, yeah. I guess they do because they know what people are bringing, but you get the idea.
That's true. There's a pretty cool aspect of Warrior is the fact that there are a lot of different, ways you can tech your deck, or a lot of different archetypes you can run to make it more difficult for people to predict what your deck actually is. One interesting note that I wanted to make about Mage is the fact that I've noticed recently the lines between Freeze and Tempo Mage sort of blurring to the point where the only main difference sometimes is, are they running Ice Block? Which I found pretty interesting.
Ice Block is ironically a really, I guess it kind of makes sense, but Ice Block's a really slow card. Like, yeah. It's 3 mana committed for essentially no value for anywhere between arguably 3 to infinite amount of turns.
Essentially, all it does is it stalls out the game so that you can have enough. You can basically have 10 extra mana to cast all your spells into your opponent's face.
Yeah, it stalls 1 turn. That's what it does. It stalls 1 turn.
It gives you 10 extra mana to cast more spells into your opponent's face. That's all it really does. It's really interesting to me. So let's move on. We got, I'm assuming this is Paladin. Yellow is Paladin anything. Here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we got 1 Anyfin Paladin. Yeah, like we said. I mean, it's you can bring it, but it's definitely not the strongest archetype right now. And it's also going to be gone when the cards rotate out of standard, because Anyfin can happen. The defining card for the archetype is being removed. Right. And we have 1 N'Zoth Priest, it looks like, being brought.
Right.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting, because I thought Resurrect Priest would be the priest to get brought.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what's actually in this priest deck. I don't know if I could find it, because I'd have to do a lot of clicking around. But that'd be interesting to look at. And it looks like for Rogue, we have 2 Malygos Rogues and 2 Miracle Rogues. Oh.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting that there's... I honestly think that Reno Death Rattle Rogue is really good, because if you ban mid-range, there's not a lot of decks that can beat you. You have pretty decent early game, you've got pretty decent mid-game, and your late game is the best in the game, because you have Reno, Jackson, and N'Zoth.
I think a key thing to think about here is that Malygos actually can beat mid-range Shaman. So if you did not want to ban mid-range Shaman, Malygos Rogue can actually beat that. If you wanted to ban Warrior, for example. And Shaman, we have all 16 players bringing a mid-range Shaman deck. We've already spoke about this at length. Mid-range Shaman is the most impressive class archetype in the game right now. Yeah. And that's not going to be changing with the changes that we've seen so far, unless they receive some nerfs, or the other classes all receive, you know, commensurate buffs to bring them up to the level that mid-range Shaman is at right now. Because the only card that mid-range Shaman is really losing is Tunnel Trog, which is a hit. It's a hit to the archetype, but you know, it's not not enough. It's not gonna destroy the archetype altogether.
Right.
And Warlock, we have 6 Disco Locks, like we've been discussing. Disco Lock is basically the only Warlock deck right now, and it is a very strong deck. It's just miles ahead of any other possible Warlock deck you could bring right now, just because of the insane value you can get out of the discarding the cards into the 3/3 that you just get for free, you know, just discarding and drawing cards, and it's a really crazy strong deck.
Right.
And then finally we have Warrior, and as we spoke about, this is the most diverse out of all these classes. We have 1 N'Zoth Warrior, we have 2 Dragon Warriors, 4 Cthulhu Warriors, and 6 Control Warriors. What do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting. Warrior is also one of my favorite classes, and I've always thought Control just doesn't go away, man. Like, Justicar Trueheart. Wait, is Justicar out of the rotation? She has to be, right?
She was not included when I was looking at these cards.
I meant, like, she must be, like, is she already out of the rotation? Or is she, like...
No, she's not. She's in the rotation. Control Warrior runs her.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, that card is... As long as that card is in the meta, I mean, like...
I don't believe
Warrior,
she's rotating out.
Yeah, I don't think she is either. And
I mean...
I think...
I don't think we can discount the impact that at least Starseeker being removed is going to have on Control Warrior, because that is a pretty critical card when it comes down to the very last, you know, 6-ish cards in your hand when you're playing that control matchup. The Elise Starseeker really gives you that extra bit of gas.
And don't forget, Bran in a lot of Cthulhu decks is really strong, even if he's just played with the 2/1 that deals 2 damage.
Yeah.
And he's usually, you try and play him with either the Emperor, so you get an extra 4/6, or you get the extra 10 armor from the 7-mana guy.
Yeah, all those things are very powerful things to use Bran with.
Yeah, so I think Warrior and Hunter are the 2 decks I'm really interested in seeing, not just because I play those decks a lot, because I think those are the 2 decks that, one, Hunter can beat anybody, and I think Warrior can beat anybody, especially because you're going to have to play so differently against so many different types of people. By the way, I did look it up. It is a Hamster is running N'Zoth Priest.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. So I'm trying to like look
Let's
it up,
look
and
at
it's being a little weird.
I'm pulling it up here.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's running N'Zoth, Karen, Sylvanas, Shifting Shade. Those are all of... He's also running Museum Curators. Those are his Death Rattle guys, if you look on the right side.
Right. Interesting.
So it's essentially just Control Priest.
It's a lot more minion focused than Resurrect Priest. Resurrect Priest has a lot of spells like Entomb. Oh, he's running Entomb.
You know what's crazy about this deck?
I thought it was odd when I didn't see Entomb. I was like, no Entomb. How's he gonna?
What's crazy about this deck actually is, one, it's got no... the 3 big cards that I see that are missing are actually all minions. It's got no Northshire Cleric, it's got no Injured Blade Master, and it has no Akanai Soul Priest. So it's got no Akanai Circle, it's got no Injured Blade Master Circle, and it's got no...
he really is relying on those Doomsayers.
Yep.
The Wild Pyromancers and his 2 Excavated Evils. Oh, he also he's teching in Holy Nova. That's why. He has 2 Holy Novas in there as well.
Which is weird, because that's not really run, but I think it's interesting. I wonder how it's going to go for him.
Especially 2 of. I've seen some Holy Novas.
I've seen 1 of.
Are still running 1 ofs, yeah. This is a really interesting list. I don't... I don't know how this list would win, but I guess I'd have to see it played out to really know. It'd be interesting to watch this.
It's probably just like fatigue almost.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have done a pretty solid overview of that so far. So let's move on. Next, we want to talk about BlizzCon, which is actually happening. Oh gosh.
2 weeks and a day.
2 weeks.
No, 2 weeks.
So about
no, 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. Okay. I love this intro video. All the people just like rushing into the building. So we both have our tickets for BlizzCon, correct?
Correct.
So we are both going to this. It's gonna be really exciting. So let's talk about what do you think are some of the things that you're most excited to see at BlizzCon?
So if we just do like a blanket overview really fast of like usually at BlizzCon they announce something for every game except, you know, Diablo.
Right. Well, I mean, they did announce something for Diablo, but
all they announced at Diablo last year was they got Mercy Wings. That was it. That was the only time they mentioned Diablo during the opening
was that
ceremony.
really it?
Yeah, they got Mercy Wings if you pre-ordered Overwatch.
Man,
so
they didn't even try, dude.
if we just go game by game, honestly, they could make something from Diablo this year to make up for last year.
Right.
Unlikely, but again, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft is really odd because they already announced the patch. They already have an expansion out earlier than normal, so they're not going to talk about that.
Right.
So I don't know what they can add to WoW, which is really weird because WoW is usually a big staple of their opening ceremonies. Hearthstone, it's got to be an expansion. Got to be an expansion, 100%, not even a question.
Right.
By the way, since I forgot to mention this in the Hearthstone segment, I am predicting that somehow they find a way to keep Reno Jackson in the game. I think it's going to happen.
They have to remove it, man.
Nah, man. Rules aren't rules anymore. Overwatch, I think 2 new heroes, if I had to guess, and a new map. 2 new heroes and a map sounds right for BlizzCon, especially if there's not a lot of other stuff for like WoW and Diablo.
That sounds fair.
StarCraft 2, I think they're coming out with a remastered. I think this is the year that they remaster either StarCraft 1 or put even more polish on StarCraft 2, I think. And that's, I think, all the Blizzard games.
Wasn't there like some fringe group of people who really wanted a Warcraft remaster?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people actually that want a Warcraft like with updated graphics and storyline and completely redone visuals and the whole 9 yards. But I'm not somebody that played Warcraft. But yeah, if I had to bet money on things that would happen, the 2 I feel most confident in are a new hero or 2 from Heroes of the Storm. Right. Probably new heroes again, because that makes sense. Right. But yeah, probably from Overwatch, actually, if I had to guess, because they've been doing that where they've been crossing stuff like that, or something like a ghost version of Varian Rin or something.
Right, they like to do cross promotions for their different games, so they'll give you something in the Warcraft universe that originated from like the Diablo universe, for example.
Right, and so I think it'll be,
you know, vice versa.
So you know what's really interesting is, do they pull from a different universe into the Overwatch universe?
Could be.
So they haven't brought a hero from another game into Overwatch yet. And so I'm curious if they do something like that. But yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super excited to go. They still haven't announced the band, which makes me sad.
Oh yeah, the band that's going to be playing. We don't know that yet.
I think it's going to... If I had to bet, it's either Green Day or Deadmau5. Those are my 2 guesses. Green Day, Deadmau5.
Interesting. An interesting couple of options.
What about you? What are you excited for?
I'd say I am probably most excited for the Hearthstone expansion. Ever since they announced Standard, I've been way more into Hearthstone. Something about the fact that they basically force the meta to continually update keeps it feeling fresh and interesting to me. And before they announced Standard, my interest in the game was kind of starting to wane a little bit, because you had these scenarios where there were cards that were super strong that had been super strong for like a really, really long time. Super oppressive, didn't feel very fun to play against, and you were just sort of stuck with it because they were just in the game and you just had to deal with that. and oftentimes they wouldn't be replaced because they were just so strong. And so standard really, you know, changed that up for me. So I'd say I'm most excited for the new expansion for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see how it goes. We've got some cool favorites coming this year, like Monte Cristo and Doa, that I think is really exciting for some people to get.
Oh yeah, they're both coming.
Right, I think it's going to be an interesting year for spectators when it comes to fan meetups. I think that a lot of people are going to do those because over the last like year or two, those have grown in popularity, and so that's what I expect to happen.
Okay. All right.
Also, for the record, an update to League. I think I'm looking at the opening ceremony right now for the game. Yeah. I think Bengi is starting.
Oh, that's an interesting choice.
Guess what? They're going to lose game 1 again. They're going to lose game 1.
Oh, man.
They
just use Bengi to collect that information, man.
It's literally what they do, dude. It's depressing. But
just collect that info, Bengi, and report back to us, and then you can sit on the bench.
But yeah, I think once we wrap up this BlizzCon piece, which shouldn't be much longer because we've gone over a lot of BlizzCon.
Yeah, let's actually segue right into the.
I was gonna say maybe we should be done for the day. I was thinking maybe it might be better to save the WoW stuff for next time. We can include the Karazhan stuff. I didn't know your opinion on that.
I don't think there's too much to say about it, so let's just announce it really quick.
Okay, let's do it.
Because actually, I would say that the second most thing that I'm excited to see at BlizzCon is the WoW.
Okay.
And segueing right into WoW, I would say that the Karazhan patch that's coming up is probably something that definitely something I'm very excited to see because of the fact that it is just such a huge nostalgia fest. I mean, Karazhan was Burning Crusade.
Yep.
It was like 90% of players, when you ask them, you know, what stands out to them about Burning Crusade, they're gonna say, oh, it's got to be Karazhan, man. It's got to be Karazhan.
Yeah. So BC and Ice Wrath are accepted as the best expansions, and if you disagree, it's okay to be wrong. I understand that sometimes you have to be wrong to learn, but those are the two best expansions. And yeah, so if they remake Karazhan and ICC, I'm game. I'm all sorts of game. I think this Karazhan's going to be really cool. They've talked about some kind of chess thing that they have, which was my favorite part. Yeah. Oh, Rochellephant coming in with really, really, really smart. That's super smart. She says, I think Blizzard is going to announce a sequel to their movie.
That's interesting.
That makes sense. That's a big enough announcement that they could not have a World of Warcraft one and it still be hype. I totally agree.
It'd be interesting to see if they would do something like that because their last movie took a very time for them to actually follow through on. So if they announced it, it might be a kind of situation where they're announcing it almost too early because Blizzard has this reputation for they don't release something until it's absolutely perfect, basically.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure they've probably been working on another movie since the other one came out.
Yeah, that's true. It'd be interesting to see if they do something like that. So I think it'd be cool to watch this little Karazhan intro here just to build the hype. So let me go ahead and play that out and see what it looks like.
You know what that is?
Master has been gone for so very long.
There's no sound from me, I assume there's no sound from you.
I anticipate his return in every gust. It's maddening. Whatever is one to do to pass the time.
Come on, Morris, why you gotta be like that?
I've gone and made a mess. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Our unannounced visitors. Preparations must be made, for the Master will return to Karazhan soon.
All right. Well, that's a fun little intro there. I remember seeing that actually a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I'm so excited.
So stoked. As a minor update to League, you remember how I said Peanut's really good at this game?
Yes.
Yeah, he has the most kills in the tournament as a jungler.
That's pretty impressive.
That's absurd. Anyway, I'm super excited for Karazhan, man. It's my favorite raid of all time, even though it's a dungeon in this upcoming thing. My personally, as a little more background, my favorite dungeon will always be vanilla Deadmines.
It's a good choice. It's a solid choice. All right, well, I think that's, I mean, right now in WoW, obviously, we're doing the Emerald Nightmare, which is why I have this page queued up here. That's the raid that is currently happening, and right now we are on Heroic
Xavius. 6 of 7.
Yeah, we're 6 of 7. We're struggling on this guy. This guy's been giving us some trouble, right?
I don't know if struggling's the word, man. We got him to 1% last night.
I mean, I think 17 pulls is enough to qualify as
all
struggling.
right,
But
all right,
1% is pretty close. I mean, it's not struggling to the point where I don't think we can get him. I think we're gonna get him. We're just struggling a little bit, especially compared to Cenarius, which took us like 3 pulls.
Yeah, we 3-shot him.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because a lot of people said that Cenarius was
harder.
Avius, and we really struggled a lot. Scenario. Something about the boss fight mechanics probably struggling.
Yeah, we have a lot of let's say mishaps with of the blade variety amongst other things, which can lead to some fun.
Okay, well, I think we've pretty much exhausted all of our topics for today. We had a pretty good segment talking about our backgrounds in video games, you know, what games we used to love when we were kids, what games we love now, you know, what were the biggest obstacles that we encountered in gaming. And we've gone over a bit of the news for League of Legends, Hearthstone, and World of Warcraft, and also talked about BlizzCon. So I think we're pretty much done here. Any closing comments from you?
No, I think it was a good start. We got over stuff pretty well. I think we were pretty in-depth about it. Can't wait to do it again next week. I think it'll be interesting how we want to do it for BlizzCon. I don't know if you want to like try and vlog it or something, or if you want to record it a few days before. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think it was really fun.
Yeah, that could be cool to do some type of a BlizzCon episode. That'd be a really good idea. We should definitely look into trying to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right, well, I guess with that said, let's go ahead and close it out here. It's been fun. I'm really happy with how it went, and I'm excited for the next podcast.
Yeah, me too. Follow us at follow at Video Game Jumble on Twitter, Facebook, and on the website, which should just be www.videogamejumble.com.
Correct.
And for me, go ahead and follow me at Zeronius on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys.
See you guys later.